Today we visit a marchland's town where a man arrives with gold and confidence, another receives it with courtesy and caution, and both believe the exchange is finished when the coin is counted. But some payments are settled much, much later.
Wind came off the sea in steady gusts that found their way through every gap in wool and leather. In Fressalt Hoo, the noise was from labour as rope dragged against timber, mallets struck pegs, and saws bit into wood. Men called to one another across the brine and pitch as the winter sun lit their enterprise. Edwald Ferchar rode into it with his entourage, his guards coming first in 2 files, with their spears upright. In the streets, carts edged aside, and boys carrying creels flattened themselves to doorways. Behind them came Edwald, riding high in the saddle of his own horse. His hood was thrown back, revealing his neat hair and a northern face hardened by weather. A thick gold ring adorned his right hand, its knotwork unfamiliar to this coast. He did not look around as a traveller might. He analysed, tracked angles and distances, and studied the harbour mouth and the line of land beyond it. He saw where men stood, but also where they did not stand. A man stepped out from beneath a creaking sign. His hair was grey and his beard was trimmed, but his hands were stained with resin and soot, and the black that lived under fingernails when you worked among tar and iron. "Edwald Ferchar of Windashannock," the man said. "You bring your own weather with you. I am Lorne Victor, master forger to the shipwrights of the Hoo." Edwald looked down at him. "You know me?" "A man who pays in gold and expects the world to remember him will always be known," Victor replied. "Your message reached us ahead of you." "It would be strange if it had not, I suppose." Edwald looked past him to the yards where half-formed hulls lay beneath the sheds. "I'm told you make boats that hold their lines in ugly water." "We do," Victor said, "and we make them to the Hoo's terms." Edwald swung down, and 2 of his guards immediately flanked him. Their faces were set in that disciplined blankness that made men look more dangerous than they were, ready for the next order. Victor turned and led them through the yard gate, directly to a keel laid on blocks. Pegs sat proud in precise rows, and Edwald ran his fingers along it the way a knight might touch a blade. "Not pine," he said. "Black fir," Victor replied, "rivered down from the inland slopes. We don't build long keel boats from softwood." Edwald nodded. "I want 3. Victor did not blink. 3. "2 light," Edwald went on. "Fast, shallow draught. 1 heavier, a hold that will take weight without wallowing." Victor went straight for the practicalities. "Where will they sail?" "North," Edwald said. "My coast is not what it was. Too many mouths and too few nets." He sighed. "Raiders, too. They come in the night, burn boats at the waterline and cut the nets. They take all they can carry and kill if they're resisted." Victor did not offer sympathy. He gave Edwald the courtesy of letting his grievance stand. "You have trouble there, then," he said. Edwald's hand closed on the keel edge. "My people are harried. I'm tired of paying in blood for what others call misfortune." Victor nodded. "Understood, but the Hoo's boats aren't cheap." "I didn't ride this far for cheap," Edwald snapped. "Name the sum." Victor did so. It was not obscene, but it was the kind of number that meant labour, iron, cloth and tar, men's backs, and the right to pull skilled hands away from other work. Edwald did not waver. "A down payment," Edwald said. "A third," Victor answered, "in coins struck here, shims and crowns. We do not take raw metal or northern strikes for a sum like this without weighing and testing it ourselves." It slows the work, and I sense that you don't want delays." Edwald did not care for delays. In fact, it was a concept he resented. "You take the Who's coin?" "We take the Marchlands coin," Victor corrected. "But it's best struck and counted here, where the marks are fresh and the weights trusted." Edwald gestured, and one of his guards brought forward a saddlebag. The leather creaked under the weight of it. "Then I will have it struck," he said. "Now." Victor looked surprised. "You carry gold and silver with you?" "I carry what I need," Edwald replied. "Do not look at it like you've never seen it before, Victor." "I have seen it," Victor said, "just not always carried by the hand that owns it." "I'm not like other men," Edwald said. "Remember that, Forge Master." It was a warning not lost on Victor, and he bowed again. "Then you will want the mint. Lord Avery Cambray's men will strike for you. The shaving is theirs by custom." "Shaving?" Edwald said, irritated. "Custom. A tidy way to call a cut." "The cut keeps roads safe," Victor replied. "It keeps men fed. It keeps order. Custom buys more than coins." Edwald did not argue. There was no time. "Take me," he said, "or send someone. I will not wander like a pilgrim looking for a shrine." Victor beckoned a boy hovering near a shed. "Tamman," he said, "go to the mint. Tell them Edwald Ferchar of Wyn-de-Shannock comes with metal to strike for a shipwright's down payment. Tell them it's immediate." The boy ran, ducking under beams and out into the wind with the speed of someone who knew where every nail lay. The mint lay inland from the harbour. It was not a grand building. Smoke rose from a rear vent, and the front door was oak, reinforced with iron straps. A man waited outside in a coat cut well enough to indicate authority, a short blade at his hip. "My lord," he said, bowing, "you are expected." Edwald stared at him. "By whom?" "By the mint," the man replied. "I am Senec, steward to the master minter. Please, come inside." Edwald and his guards moved to follow, but Senec lifted a hand, polite and firm. "Two only," he said. "The rest must wait in the yard. It is heat and space, not distrust." Edwald considered insisting, purely to remind this man of his place, but chose not to make a point of it. Better to appear magnanimous, which would cost him nothing. "Two," he said, and glanced back. "Rolf, Hahn, you. The rest outside. Do not wander." The guards obeyed, and the others took position along the wall, their eyes scanning the street and the door. Senec opened the mint door, and furnace warmth spilled out. Inside, the air was smoky, staining the walls where it had kissed them for years. A set of scales sat on a heavy table, and stamps lay on a cloth, each one an iron block with carved faces hidden beneath. Along the back wall, a hearth glowed red, and an older man moved there with tongs. Another man stood by the table, older than Senec, and his eyes lifted as Edwald entered. "Edwald Ferchar," he said. "Merton Dane, Master Minter under Lord Avery Cambray." "I have business here," Edwald replied. "We are the place for it," Merton said. "Senec says you bring metal." Edwald swung the saddlebag onto the table with a thump that made the scale arms tremble. "Gold and silver, crowns and shims. The shipwrights demand a local strike." "They are wise," Merton said. "We will strike." Edwald drew the bag open. Inside it were bars and ingots, rough-edged and unshaped, wealth in its most basic form. He watched Merton's face for reaction and saw none, which annoyed him. He wanted to be seen and found to be immense, and being treated as merely a procedure was insulting. "We will weigh and test first," Merton said. "You doubt me?" "I doubt no man's title," Merton replied. I doubt only metal that is not passed under our hand. The stamp binds Lord Cambray's name to the coin, not to mention the Marchland's trust. It must be right. Edwald's hand closed on the bag edge. Not so assiduous with the kerns, I'll wager. Very well, do it, he said, and do it swiftly. As swiftly as correctness allows, sir, and the kerns are produced across the yard to an exacting standard, I assure you. Merton put on gloves, took the silver first, and placed it on the scale. The arm dipped and settled as he arranged the weights. At the hearth, the older man dipped a rod into molten metal and drew out a thin thread that cooled quickly. Merton watched, nodded once, and set it aside. "How much for the shaving?" Edwald asked. Merton did not look up. "The shaving is a portion kept from what is struck. The amount depends on metal and dye. It is the cost of converting wealth into lawful coin." "Lawful," Edwald repeated, "as though gold in my hand were unlawful." "Gold in your hand is gold," Merton said. "Gold struck into crowns is a promise." Edwald tapped his ring once against the table. "The Marchlands trust the stamp." "The Marchlands trust what survives," Merton replied. "The stamp is how it remembers." The older man by the hearth brought a small tray. Bright flakes lay on it already, the first shavings, gathered with care. They looked like nothing, dust you could brush away, and yet Edwald felt the gnawing pain of it being taken from him. He had expected it, but he still felt the intrusion. Merton's hand hovered over the stamps, and a familiar shape was exposed on the cloth. A sigil intricate enough to be recognizable without being ornate. Jevon Yerant's mark. Merton noticed Edwald staring at it. "The last king's mark," he said. "It must be on crowns, no matter who strikes them. Old law." "Old indeed," Edwald said. "We press it because if we do not, men ask why," Merton replied. "And when men ask why, they tend to ask what else has been changed." "You fear questions?" "I respect them," Merton said, "but immediate assurance is far preferable." Edwald misread the remark as simple caution. He did not hear the part that mattered, that law and mark could be used to guide violence as easily as to prevent it. "Strike then," he said. Merton nodded. "How many crowns do you require?" Edwald named the number, and again, Merton did not react. He converted it in his head with ease, speaking only the result. "And shims?" "A mix," Edwald said. "Crowns for the work, shims for the men." Gold was heated and poured. It cooled and was cut, weighed and trimmed. The shavings fell like bright flakes and were gathered with a small scraper. Nothing was ever lost in a mint. Loss of this kind was still profit. The mint did not hurry to match Edwald's impatience, moving instead at its own pace, that of correct work. "You take your time," Edwald said. "I take the time the coin requires," Merton replied. "A flawed crown costs more than it saves." Edwald turned his attention to the shavings cloth, watching the pile grow. When the first crowns lay on the table, they were still warm, and Merton placed them in a neat line. Every coin bore Cambray's mark on one face, a sheaf and a hooked fish. Each crown bore Jevon Yerant's sigil on the other. The king's mark looked almost apologetic, pressed into new gold, but it was there, unavoidable, like a ghost. Edwald picked one up and turned it. It was well struck, he could not deny it. He could also not deny the truth beneath it, that his wealth now wore another man's authority, and a dead man at that. Merton began counting aloud, and Edwald listened impassively as the contempt began to rise. It was not for Merton or for Cambray, but for the ease of it. He had brought metal, demanded recognition, and been only mildly resisted by procedure. Now he would leave with coin that any man in the Marchlands would accept, and the system would continue without ever registering his presence. That ease offended and soothed him at the same time, because it both confirmed his place and also revealed that it rested upon the consent of other men. The shims came next, glittering silver, stacked in neat piles. They too bore Cambray's mark, and they too created shavings which again drew Edwald's attention. Merton slid a wooden box across the table when the counting was done. Crowns lay atop shims. "Your coin," he said, "struck here, lawful across the marchlands. The shavings remain with the mint by custom." Edwald did not thank him. He just nodded, closed the lid, and gripped the box. As he turned to leave, Merton spoke again. "My lord." Edwald paused. "What?" "You travel far with much," Merton said. "Roads are safe in the Hoo. Beyond it, men grow curious. They may mistake fortune for invitation." Edwald laughed. "Are you warning me of thieves?" "I am reminding you that consequence is not always immediate," Merton replied. Edwald smiled, but it was cold. "The marchlands like that word." "It is a word that keeps men honest," replied Merton. "It keeps poor men honest," Edwald said as he stepped closer, letting the box's weight sit between them like implied leverage. "Rich men pay for the luxury of being misunderstood." Merton met him. "Or rich men live long enough to meet the cost later." Edwald turned away, believing the last word had been his. Outside, his guards closed in, and they returned to the yards with coin that clinked. Lorne Victor met him by the keel. "You have it," he said. Edwald set the box down. "Count it." Victor counted quickly, only caring that it was true and would pay men who swung hammers and stitched sails. When he finished, he shut the lid and drew the box back to himself. "Correct," he said. "We will begin when the current contracts allow us to free hands. You will then have your boats." "I will return for them," Edwald said. "We will send word," Victor replied. "Build them as ordered," Edwald said. "Light, fast, shallow. One with a hold that takes weight." "We will build what you have ordered," Victor replied. "Boats are boats." Edwald smirked. "And a man is a man." Victor dipped a quill and began to write, forming letters with a hand that had done this many times. "A man is a problem or a customer," he said. "Today you are the latter." Edwald signed, and Victor rolled the parchment and sealed it with wax, pressing the shipwright's mark into it. A promise made by hands that knew their business. He looked over the yard, over bent backs and rasping blades. These men would build his boats, and never know where those boats would go, or what they would do beyond the horizon. They would accept coin and think of food and rent. Edwald felt contempt again for the way the world arranged itself around him. Metal became legitimacy, which in turn purchased labor, and that labor became vessels. Vessels became power. And he did not have to explain himself to anyone who mattered, nor reveal what he intended. He only had to pay, and it was too easy. But Edwald walked away satisfied. The system had received him, taken its shavings, and asked nothing of what lay ahead. At the mint door, Senec watched the yard and the road beyond. He had given Edwald coin, and in giving it, he had learned the weight of the man's urgency. He took himself back to the table and picked up the quill once more to write a letter. Not to Edwald, not this soon, but to a contact on the northern coast. He wrote 9 words. Ferchar came. 3 ships ordered. Our agreement is complete. Behind him, shavings were folded into cloth and tucked away, and profit was made from obedience.
When coin and power passes from one hand to another, and no one asks what it will be used for, Responsibility does not disappear, it merely travels unseen. What is enabled politely today may well return later as consequence, as Edwald Ferchar would find to his cost.